Many people believe, you might believe, that a strategic plan is necessarily very detailed and often very complicated and very long. And it has to be just to be effective for your business. That belief is not just wrong, it's actually actively costing you time, focus, and real growth. Now, I've helped many leaders cut through that complexity. In this video, I want to show you why your strategic plan doesn't need to be bigger. In fact, it probably shouldn't be, but it does need to be clearer. More specifically, it needs to separate the real strategy from all of the details that help you take that strategy and turn it into execution. The real strategy is the framework, the values, the vision, the priorities, and the success behaviors. Everything else matters and has value, but that belongs in a different place. If you can get this right and keep it simple and clear, that will help drive implementation and execution. So about 20 years ago, I was a brand new consultant, and I was meeting with a group of other established consultants in the community. And there was a small knot of them, maybe 3 or 4 of them. And I overheard them talking about or asking the question, how many of your clients actually complete your strategic plans or their strategic plans? When you do a session with them, how many, when you come back a year later, make measurable progress towards that plan? The consensus in that group was that only about 20% of their clients actually follow through and complete their plans. When I heard that statement, I just felt like, man, am I in some kind of a scammy business? If I'm selling a service here that only really improves the condition of 20% of my clients, that just felt wrong to me. And so, but I felt like there's also value in strategic planning and thinking strategically. And so I realized what I needed to do, or what I committed myself to do, is I didn't want to be satisfied with selling planning sessions that only produce results for 20% of my clients. I wanted to really figure out what drove implementation and what drove results. So I spent a lot of time studying that. And what I ended up discovering now, I would say about 95% of my clients either accomplish their plans or make significant progress towards their plans every single year. And there's a handful of things that I do that changed that outcomes, or those outcomes for my clients. And one of those, I'm not going to go into all of it right now, but one of those has to do with keeping the actual document itself very, very simple. And so I'm going to explain that to you today. But I found, and I really discovered this on accident, and I didn't invent the idea of a one-page strategic plan. It's a concept that's been around for a while. I found it on accident when I was working with a client. For whatever reason, we ended up coming up with a very simple plan. Maybe I just was feeling impatient, or I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just the nature of what came out, but we came up with a plan that fit on one page. And at first, I think I felt a little uncomfortable with it because it wasn't this nice, long, pretty, complicated document. But what happened is when we met for implementation sessions later, for accountability sessions following up, they were executing. They were just nailing it. And when I asked what's working for you guys, what they showed me was a binder with one of those clear plastic covers, and they all had the plan sitting on the inside of that, or they told me that it was stapled up on the wall or taped up on the wall in their offices. So every day they had the plan right in front of them. They knew what they were supposed to be focused on. And because of that, they were executing, and it was creating accountability conversations within the workplace. And I thought, oh, I've discovered something other people have discovered as well. Simplicity matters. Clarity matters. Making things easy to understand and follow matters. Having a beautiful 50-page strategic planning document, which is in the back of the bottom of a file cabinet somewhere that nobody's read or looked at in 5 years since it was written, does nobody any good. And those are the most common kinds of plans that you'll see out there. And so what I've realized is that whatever might be perceived to be lost through not having heavy detail is more than made up by having simplicity and actual execution. So don't worry, this does work, and it works for even very large organizations, and I'll explain how that works in a bit. And before you get stressed about or get really kind of fanatical about the idea of a one-page plan, I don't care if you have 1 page or 2 pages or 3 pages. In practice, many of my clients actually have a 2-page plan. One page sounds catchier, but the point though is to keep it very simple, very easy to use, and very digestible, really. So I'm going to explain how that works here in a little bit. One of the questions I like to ask is, can your leadership team actually read the plan easily? Can they reference it easily to both understand what they're supposed to be focused on right now, and to provide clarity for the entire team to make decisions. Is it a quick reference guide, or do you have to, go to the index and sort of thumb through it and figure out where something was said? Now, all of this being said, if a complicated plan works for you, do what works for you. Don't change just because I'm saying do a one-page plan. I have a client right now who's doing great. He loves complexity. He's got this spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, which just kills my brain to look at it. It's so complicated, but their organization's able to use it effectively, and it's helping them produce results. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time arguing with him that what's working for him doesn't actually work for him. If it works, that's fine. So if what you're doing right now is producing results, keep doing it. Don't worry about it. But if you're finding that you've been through a lot of planning processes and it's not producing results, this will be part of the solution for you. First, I want to define what a strategic framework is and then show you how that turns into your plan. A strategic framework is a framework that you use for decision making and for guiding behaviors. But specifically for decision making, this is a framework that we use to understand what's important to us and what should we be pursuing right now, and what have we agreed to that we will pursue right now. It starts out with your values. If you've watched my other videos, I talk about this a lot. Your values are the core principles of your organization that tell you what kinds of decisions are acceptable to us and what kinds of behaviors are acceptable to us. When you've defined these for that purpose, for helping yourself as owners or executives, to help your mid-level managers, to help your frontline managers, to help your new employees know these are the kinds of things that we like around here, and this is what an acceptable decision is, and these are the kinds of behaviors that we also like around here. And so if you're going to treat somebody this way, if you're going to do something, there's no policy written around it, and you're just having to figure it out, stay in alignment with these values, and you'll probably end up okay. It helps things work much more effectively. So your values has to do with that. Your vision has to do with where you're trying to go. So you make decisions and you act in alignment with your values, and you describe your vision. These are all components of your strategic plan. They all fit in there. After your vision, what I like to have is a one-year focus, is usually the language, I guess, that I use. This is a concept that I probably borrowed from Patrick Lencioni or somebody, where he talks about having a theme for you. It doesn't have to be a year. It could be 9 months. It could be 18 months. It doesn't really matter, but it's that time frame of this is the planning cycle, or the big hill that we're trying to climb right now. And for a lot of organizations, it's we need to grow profitability, or we need to staff up, or we need to build systems. So it's something like that. At a moment, everybody remembers, like, oh yeah, this is what we're trying to do. We're building systems this year. And so if we're wanting to start and launch new initiatives, or we're wanting to do this, that, or the other thing, you can quickly bring it back like, yes, those are all great ideas. This year, our focus is systems. This is part of where you're starting to do prioritization around your vision. So to accomplish your vision, this big goal of what you're trying to build, you have to start breaking that down. It's kind of that idea of like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You're trying to figure out how much of this elephant do we want to eat this year? What do we want to accomplish? We want to build systems. We want to build a strong management team, whatever it is. So out of that, you start to figure out, okay, if we're going to accomplish this focus of building systems, what are our priorities for this year? I usually recommend 3 to 5. Very simple, not 18. Now you probably have 18 or 1,800 things that you have to get done this year. That's understandable. But you want to figure out of all of those things, what will move the needle the most in terms of you accomplishing your one-year focus, which will move you towards your vision. And so I identify those priorities, and I usually just put them in a box and have each one written in their own box. And we'll describe what the priority is, and then I'll describe a metric around it. So I've got the priority and a metric, and the metric helps us understand how do we know if we've accomplished this. So there's probably a deadline, and there's probably, whatever it is. So we've got, we're staffed up to this point. We've got SOPs for these departments written, and we know that we're at, 95% of the SOPs are written, and they just need to be reviewed and affirmed. So whatever the metric is. So you write each of those, and then I like to have a name with each. I'm not going to write that all the way across, but you have a name so you know who's accountable for each of these things. This doesn't even necessarily mean the person who's doing it. It just means the person who's responsible for ensuring that it gets done. Basically, it's the person. The way I usually describe it to clients is, who am I supposed to look at and say, did this happen in this room right now? Who's responsible for this? And you want to have a single person be responsible for it, because if you have 3, then everyone thinks the other person's doing it and doesn't get done. It's just basic accountability practices, making things work. Then after that, you have success behaviors. This is maybe the softest, after values, softest, squishiest part of the process. And if you do it, and if you follow through, this is the thing that gives you traction and makes things happen. When I work with companies that are nailing it, they're going for it, they do their success behaviors. When I work with companies where we meet 6 months later and they still haven't done anything, they're not doing their success behaviors. It's predictable. You can see it. And so you can count on it. Success behaviors, the way I describe this, these are the things, the 1, 2, or 3 things. I usually keep it very small, that when you have a meeting like a planning session and everybody walks away afterwards and they think that was great, the vision and values sound great, when your focus sounds good, now if we all just did this around here, that would probably happen. Whatever the this is probably your success behaviors. And this can be, and usually is, pretty boring, pretty mundane sounding. It has to do with self-management. And it often is like show up on time to meetings, get reports completed on time, make sure that we're paying complete attention to detail and we don't have rework. Things like that. And so it's very common problems that usually everybody knows. It takes a minute, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 4 seconds for people to think, if we all just did this around here, things would work. Everybody knows this stuff already. You don't need to do a massive diagnostic exercise for this. You just need to be willing to talk about it and come to an agreement on these are the things that we agree to. Now, these can evolve over time. As you start getting better at it, you can improve. What do we need to do? And what does happen with success behaviors over time is it starts out from remedial, like we just need to show up on time to meetings and be prepared for meetings, to things that are actually advancing you, like we're going to go to additional trainings, or we're going to really focus on being more concise in our meetings. We're already doing great, but we want to try to figure out how to be even more focused and effective with what we're doing. That's it. This is the kind of plan that I give my clients. Now, what I will do, when I say that's it, I'm lying. I typically will also have a section on priorities that, actually, let me redraw this for you in a way. I ran out of board space here. So if the last few minutes have saved you from even one more complex, ineffective planning session, imagine the value of consistent, actionable insights. Every video on this channel helps leaders like you build a clearer, more effective business. So if you found this to be useful, like the video, subscribe to this channel, and make sure that you get the next video as it comes out. It will build directly on this kind of strategic clarity and help you turn it into real execution. All right, so what I often have is we'll have our annual priorities, and then often what I'll do is we'll take our quarterly priorities, and this is where we get into operational planning. But even with this, what are the 1 or 2 things we need to do to accomplish that priority? And we write that out. And we just have a list of all those priorities. And it has to do with it, at least whichever ones of these that we're pursuing in this quarter. So Q1 priorities, then you adjust this to Q2, Q3, Q4, and then we'll do monthly priorities. And I find that when people drill it down to this level, same thing, what does each person need to accomplish over this month? And then beneath that, success behaviors. I feel like I should have thought through this board before I started drawing on it. Anyways, so then the success behaviors fit underneath that. That's the way I lined it on a piece of paper. I don't care how you do your layout. I do it this way because you have a natural flow from this is the big picture of how we relate and make decisions. This is what we're trying to accomplish in general. This is what we're trying to accomplish this year. These are the things we need to do to get that done. This is what we need to do to get the annual stuff done. This is what we need to do this quarter. This is what we need to do this month to get the quarterly stuff done. You break it down to that level, and then you have a regular meeting at least once a month. This is what I see tends to work. At least once a month, maybe twice a month. You can have more, but usually more isn't necessary at that point. And you just track, is progress happening? And along the way, you're coaching people. If you're a leader in your organization, you're coaching people on how do you keep moving forward and help making these things work. If somebody's stuck, if somebody's not acting, you figure out, is the goal too big? Do we need to break it down? Is somebody, overwhelmed and they need more staffing support? Is somebody just not moving? Because oftentimes there's mindset blocks. You give somebody a goal. SOPs are a common one. Super valuable if you don't have them written, but most people have a mental block around writing SOPs. And so you have to kind of walk people through the process of, it's not that complicated. Here's how to do it. So that's the framework that I use. You can format that however you like, but it's a pretty simple framework for getting goals out. Typically, in terms of the one page, you can shrink this down into one page if you want. Typically, what I do is this is one page right here, and this is the strategic side. And then over here is the second page, and this is kind of the more operational side. Here's what we're going to get done this quarter and this month, and break that down. And then for each individual on their own, usually you have them set their own weekly and daily priorities. It just kind of keeps drilling down in that. I don't put that into a plan. Now, I want to talk about how this works for larger organizations, because larger organizations, obviously, you do have more complexity, you do have more detail. And so I can often use a plan like this with no more detail than that for companies that get up to, I don't know, say 20 million in revenue. It depends on what the company is and so on. And that it works fine. It provides a sufficient amount of direction that they're able to keep moving forward. However, once you start getting larger, you start moving towards 50 million, 100 million plus in revenue, usually departments have grown. Usually there's new geographies. Usually maybe there's different lines of business, and there's just more complexity within the organization. And so again, you have your overall values for the organization, you have your vision for the organization, you have your 1 year or whatever, your focus that you have, and then you have your priorities for that 1 year, and you're going to have that for the organization. So this is at the org level, and then you'll do all the same, the quarterly, the monthly, you have all of that right here. And then what you find is that some of these priorities, I'm just thinking of a construction company right now. One of these priorities is going to be for operations, the project management side of the company, and they'll have their own version of this. They're going to use the same values and the same vision. They're trying to build towards this, but what's their 1 year focus? Should be how they contribute to the organizational 1 year focus. What's their way of contributing to that? And then what are their priorities? So basically they just create their own one-page plan. What are their quarterly priorities? What are their monthly priorities? Then over here you've got maybe, equipment, and they do the same thing, or safety, or, all of the kind of support sides of a construction company. Over here you've got admin and finance, and maybe they've got their own one-page plan. Each one of them will have the same kind of plan written out the same way. And then when the leaders of these departments show up at the executive meeting, they can report on the progress that they're making towards their own plan, but you don't have to have this massive document that they're all operating off of. It is helpful too if each of them can see what each other's doing at times, because they can figure out, oh, here's how I can help you, or here's how some of those goals might conflict with some of what I'm pursuing. And that stuff, those wrinkles can get ironed out. But I like doing this because you can have a $100 million company that's working in 3 different states or communities, and has a number of different departments and teams and hundreds of employees. And you can have a plan that includes all of these departments in the organization, and the entire plan still might be under, all of the plans and the sub-plans still might be under 10 or 12 pages. Very easy to read, and it's very quick for everybody to look at the one page that tells them this is what we're supposed to accomplish this year. Trust me, this works. Keeping it simple, keeping it clear has so much more value than trying to line out a heavy level of detail. Is there a place for detail? Yes, if you're working on very complicated projects and you need to figure out how do you step by step work through the entire project, create another plan for that. But that's not strategic planning. It's planning, it's valuable, but it's not the same thing as strategy. Strategy is all about what's most important to us and what are the major approaches we're going to take to accomplishing what's most important to us. That is it. And when you get bigger than that or more complicated than that, the signal gets lost in the noise. And so you want to keep it simple. As you experiment with this for your organization, you can add or remove detail. You can format things however you want. I have just found for decades now that when people have a very simple, very readable, very easy plan, they actually execute it. And that is so much more important than having this beautiful plan that you spent $30,000 having a graphic artist make even more beautiful. And now you got this 50-page document that's bound and it gets filed away and nobody looks at it and nobody reads it. I've seen a lot of those. So you don't want to do that. You don't need to do that. There's no point in doing that. It's a huge waste of time and money. Do something that's simple, that can get you guys moving right away, and you'll thank me for it. So now you should have a basic distinction or an understanding of what makes a strategic plan usable. The real strategy is the strategic framework, the values, the vision, the priorities, and the success behaviors. All of the other details have a place, but they belong elsewhere. Now, the goal with a one-page strategic plan is not to just have a single page. The goal is to create a plan that's short enough and clear enough that your leadership team actually use it, that they actually look at it and follow it. Now, the next question is once you have that focused plan, how do you make sure it drives real scalable growth instead of just small, steady improvements? Many plans actually aim for incremental progress, but true scaling requires a different approach than what's often understood. And I break down why aiming for small, steady growth actually often doesn't even work in real businesses. A video for that should pop up on the screen right now. If you click it, I'll show you what scalable businesses do instead.